how did you actually select the older people? Was it by random, or was it by their own story and things like that? How was the selection process?
An invitation was issued in the retirement community.
Okay.
Nobody was pressed. Well, that's not quite true. I went to see some of the older men because some of the women were more willing to take part than the men. So I went to talk to some of the older men, and reluctantly they agreed.
Okay. But they agreed. That's the important part.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody was pressured.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
But they were very unsure, all of them, all the older people. Whereas the children they were also selected.
Yeah. So how about the selection process for the parents? How did you actually approach parents saying that this is what we're going to do? And then did parents ask a lot of questions? How was the initial response from parents?
Yeah. We went to 3 nursery schools first and talked to the staff. A psychologist talked to the children, and the staff of the nurseries, who also came each day with the children for the filming. They identified the children whom they thought were resilient enough to be part of an ongoing process.
Yeah, because it's not an easy process for the kids as well.
No,
Yeah.
no. And then the parents were approached. Of course, the parents had to agree.
Yeah.
So there were good explanations, not only why we were doing what we were doing, but how the children would be cared for. It's very important. And then the ways in which the children would be cared for when they were involved in filming. And the parents were probably a bit anxious too, but the production company involved them so that they felt part of it. And by the end, they were all extremely happy because their small child increasingly came home and talked enthusiastically about what had happened and about their new friends and what they were doing and how much they loved it.
All right. So, talking about the show, the first season was shot in Bristol.
Yes.
And then the second series was shot in Nottingham.
Yes.
Okay. So, for that show, that production value and making a show like that, how was it difficult to get these 2 generations into one room? How was the set? Was it a lot of preparation done and things like that?
Yes. In both places, we were able to find a large open area, and it was called, for the programs, the nursery.
Okay.
So a lot of colourful bookcases and tables and chairs and workspaces and things that children would like were there. There were soft surfaces on the floor. So it's a big space, and behind the bookcases were cameras, apertures cut out, and there were cameras hung from the ceilings. So there were fixed cameras, and there were cameras that are operated by camera people. But the children and the older people knew they were being filmed, but they were unaware of the cameras. And so their behavior was authentic, and when you see the programs, you can see that. They're not performing.
Yeah.
It was completely unscripted. But the activities of each day were organized, and there was a person who was skilled in working with young children who created activities that the children would like, and the older people worked with them. And over a time, all of their experiences of working with children in the past all came flooding back, and they loved that.
All right. Talking about that, a very nice way for us to go into our next topic would be the impact of what the show did. Let's go into, maybe you can tell us, Professor, about some of the stories of the older people reacting towards the kids, and how did that change for them?
Yes. It's important to say that the initial tests of the older people showed that they were all, to some degree, and some to a great degree, depressed. People who were aged between 80 and 103 all inevitably had a clutch of chronic illnesses, arthritis, Parkinson's disease, histories of falling. Some had cognitive deficits and were worried about memory loss. Quite typical of people of that age group. So the tests showed at the beginning that they were frail, that they had cognitive deficits, that they were depressed, and that they were physically unsure. As the weeks went on, and the children had expectations of them, eventually you saw them throw away their sticks and engaging with the children. And the children wanted them to do what children do. So Hamish, who was very grumpy, who became something of a star, who said he couldn't possibly get on the floor with children because he had a prosthetic leg and he'd lost this leg in an accident when he was 15. And in one of the programs you see him rolling on the floor and becoming a lion, with becoming a child with children. They loved it. And he became a favorite. And he was amazed. He was amazed that children liked him, because he had no experience of children. And they wanted him every day. And they would say on the bus coming, "I want to see Hamish today." And then there was a Dutch lady who was very depressed and very open about her depression. And in the tests, she was uncertain. She couldn't do some of those physical tests. And she didn't know if she could last the course. And by the end, she was beaming. She had been a teacher. She'd been involved with learning with children, teaching children. All her skills were coming back. And by the end, her depression had completely left her. After the series, she joined local choirs. She was going to meetings. People stopped her in the street. People asked her to go and talk to meetings and say, "How did this happen to you?" There was another woman who was very bereaved and had quite severe physical disabilities. And one of the activities was to have a sports day. And in the programs, you see her with a little girl running. She had not run for 20 years.
Wow.
And you can see the transformation. And it was this expectation from this small child that said, "You can do it." So we didn't cure anybody. You can't cure arthritis. You can't cure any of these late life conditions. So what we did in the programs and what people saw was that we restored to them the capabilities that they had allowed to atrophy. You know, the things that they could have done that they'd stopped doing. They'd become anxious and cautious and depressed. And if you take some of that caution and anxiety away, the real person comes back again. And so we can do that with lots of people. Of course, you don't have to be on television to do it.
Exactly.
And so it was the visual that did it.